The year 2020 has been a year of turmoil, a year that should have begun with promise and ambition, turned from a February of uncertainty to a March of unpredictability, and found itself firmly in confusion by April. Humanity at large found itself surrounded by chaos, tragedy, heartache, and unpredictability throughout the remainder of the year. While virtually all sectors of the economy were affected, education system around the world was severely hit, with more than 188 countries forced to close schools in March and many remaining closed throughout the rest of the year. And don't we know so well, new thoughts, innovations, and growth emerge from the centers of education and learning. We went through a lot of turmoil, but proudly emerged with an absolute new approach that has transformed the education system worldwide. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a sunrise of youthful talent. Welcome to a new dawn where you will witness some of the most intellectual and creative undergraduate and postgraduate minds from colleges across the globe. The smart young minds that emerged out of the turmoil and are raring to prove their worth. Have you seen how the universe is lit up with stars on a dark night and how the waves sparkle when the sunlight falls on them? Today, this gathering too glistens and shines with the presence of many such dignitaries. We have with us Captain Raghuraman, founding CEO, NatGrid, ex-president Reliance Industries, distinguished fellow ORF, and an acclaimed author. Welcome, sir. Shri Sudhir Nanavati, sir, president of GLS University, executive vice president, Gujarat Law Society. He is the senior counsel at the Supreme Court and the High Court of Gujarat. He is also the ambassador of Gujarat for the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. We're also graced with the presence of Dr. Balchandra Joshi, Provost GLS University, Ms. Chandni Kapadia, Chief Operating Officer, GLS University, and Dr. Dharmesh Shah, Registrar, GLS University. Thank you one and all for your presence. We've often heard that when a door is shut, another opens. Or when it rains lemons, we must learn to make lemonade. Every cloud has a silver lining. Yes, true, but these are cliches, simply figures of speech and language. The pandemic has forced us to look beyond words. The global economy has driven us to convert these words into actions. Life has motivated us to move from peaceful shores onto stormy seas. GLS IBA's image has broken ground and has gone beyond these mere words through its theme, Harnessing Disruption. Let's go through a short AV that shall explain the theme and vision behind image this year.
In ancient Greek folklore, the phoenix is associated with the sun and is considered to cyclically regenerate itself and obtain new life by arising from its ashes. Over the years, the phoenix has become a symbol for hope, strength, grace, majesty, and regeneration. The year 2020 brought along with it COVID-19. The global pandemic had caused the world to come to a standstill. Humanity was confined, and so was progress and growth. Like all other fields, the education field saw a setback more than what could have ever been imagined. But apparently, mankind never forgets that eternal hope remains at the bottom of the Pandora's box. And here at GLS BBA, we've never stopped the process of evolving and shaping ourselves to strive better with each passing day. A college that established its roots in the year 1999 under the Gujarat University with barely 60 students has flourished to become a private university which always ranked among the top 5 colleges in Gujarat and now has a massive alumni base of 8,000 students all over the world. Just about 2 decades later, GLSBBA has grown into a college that is known and respected throughout the state for its quality education, pedagogy, and extracurricular activities such as Andesh, Samvad, Samvedna, Shatranj, Imagination, Horizon, and of course, Image, and many more. The bottom line of all these activities is the holistic development of its students. The global pandemic has reaffirmed the fact that change is the only constant. GLSBBA took the Phoenix as its inspiration and welcomed the challenges of the new e learning process head on. And we can only claim that we rose majestically from what was supposed to be a point of no return. Hope prevails, hard work, and vision succeed.
I'm extremely privileged to introduce our director, Dr. Shefali Dani. Innovative, compassionate, respected, and a visionary are only some of the words that define her. She is a leader who believes in making her people stand beside her and not behind her. She is an agent of change and an epitome of simplicity, grace, and strength. It's my privilege to invite Dr. Shefali Dani to give her welcome address.
Good morning to one and all present. Respected Captain Raghuraman sir, Sudhir sir, Dr. Joshi sir, Dr. Dharmesh bhai, Chandni ma'am, all the dignitaries, distinguished guests, participants and students. It is indeed a matter of pleasure and privilege for me to welcome you all to the annual International Management Fest Image 2021. GMSBB understands the importance of value addition that is brought through education in lives of children. Along than classroom teaching, we believe in giving students the required exposure that helps them to achieve future endeavor. GLS BBA has been organizing image since 2002 as a non-conventional method to mentor students and thus by ensure that they learn from extramural activities. This is possible because we are a part of legacy called Gujarat Law Society, the trust which was established in 1927. GLS established GLS University under the visionary leadership of Sri Sudhirbhai Nanavati with the intention to impart quality education in the changing time of digitalization. Last year, when we organized this fest with the theme People, Planet and Profit, rarely did we perceive the factors which could affect and paralyze people's lives. At the onset of 2020, with the availability of advanced medical facilities, it was absolutely unthinkable that any disease would bring the world to knee. By March 2020, a very severe lockdown was imposed in almost every part of the world to check the spread of COVID-19. Life came to standstill, but it was the termination of the economic activities that affected people the most. Millions of people faced hunger. Thousands of people turned unemployed. Hundreds of businesses shut down permanently. Yet, green shoots became visible when India became manufacturer of PPE kits from being an importer within 2 months of the coronavirus outbreak. It is this resilient spirit of the people of India gave us an idea to organize this year's fest on the theme of harnessing disruption. It is truly said, हौसले के तरकश में कोशिश का वो तीर जिंदा रखो, हौसले के तरकश में कोशिश का वो तीर जिंदा रखो, हार जाओ चाहो जिंदगी में सब कुछ, हार जाओ चाहे जिंदगी में सब कुछ, मगर फिर से जीतने की उम्मीद जिंदा रखो. Therefore, to ensure continuity, we have organized Image online this time. Consequently, there has been immense participation, and that too from countries like Russia, Australia, and Nepal. As we are organizing this fest in an unprecedented situation, we have with us Captain Raghuraman to inaugurate the fest, who weathered challenges not only at Siachen but also in bureaucracy as well as the corporate world. And today he is with us to share his insights on how to handle disruptions in every phase of life. I extend a very warm welcome to you, sir. Thank you for joining us. I am sure his insights will serve as a guiding light to our future management professionals. I welcome Shri Sudhir sir, the president of GLS University, who has kindly agreed to chair over the inaugural session of Image 2021. We are able to organize this fest virtually only because of his visionary insistence on making optimum use of technology for teaching learning process. Sir, I thank you for being with us in all thick and thin. I heartily welcome participants whose overwhelming response has written a new chapter in the history of Image. I hope that your participation in this fest will help you to get insight into developing strategies to overcome disruptions. It's with immense pride that I conclude my speech sharing the details of the overwhelming response we have received for Image 2021 this year. Please see the presentation of the participation for Image 2021. Thank you all.
Of course, Captain Raghuraman's CV is one of the most impressive descriptions of a person with diverse experience, beginning as a captain in the Indian Army and then moving on to be the founding CEO at NatGrid and then sterling stints at Mahindra and Mahindra and Reliance. But his CV is only one part of the reason he is here. The other part of the reason is what is not on his CV. The inspiration that his life gives to young Indians, the strength of character that his aura emanates, the appeal of his personality that his ideas manifest. I sit here today in awe of this amazing soul who commands respect for the sheer integrity of character and the steadfastness of his guts. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Raghuraman.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you for your kind words, kind and very, very generous words. It's an honor to be amongst probably a group of leaders who have been tried by fire even when they were in their education. So I think I'm actually looking forward to the performance of these batches all over India who are in the midst of the pandemic and who have had to have probably one of the strongest and the most overwhelming business transformations, at least a couple of years before they thought that they would encounter real life, in the fact that they've had to continue with their education during the pandemic and the lockdown. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm basically going to share some thoughts that I have on how I think the students and the younger generation of people who are probably facing this crisis, when history of the world is written at some point of time, there will be a before Corona and an after Corona. Literally, BC will then depict before era before Corona, and maybe some of the young leaders who are sitting here, potential leaders, will narrate this to their next generations and younger generations that good old days before Corona it used to happen like this, and after Corona it happens like that. So I guess it is a moment in history, and I'm so happy that you decided to go ahead with your program despite the fact that there has been a lockdown. And indeed, many universities and many organizations of the world have continued to continued work despite this adversity. But there are some aspects that I hope I'll highlight in those areas where we can maybe rethink the way we are working. So before I do that, let me just share a presentation with you. You will have to enable my sharing. Can the tech team please allow me to share a presentation? There we are. So I hope you can see this screen in front of you where it says, yeah, great. So we are good to go. Now, we must have all heard of this term called VUCA, and I'm sure many of the students here had heard of it and with great difficulty memorized it: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And now the world has changed again. It has changed from the VUCA world to what is being known increasingly as the ruptured world, which is why, interestingly, your theme is also harnessing disruption. By the way, this root RUPT that you see on your screen is the Latin root for break. It means to break. And that is why you have this root in erupt, in interrupt, in disruption. But here we are going to use this acronym to illustrate some ways in which the world has changed, even from the VUCA world, which was always volatile, uncertain, complex, and all of that. It has now become even more uncertain. And I'll give it to you with practical examples. So rapidity. This is my favorite story when I narrate the rapidity of the way the world has changed for us. And I'm sure you all have personal stories which are similar to this one. That on the 8th of March, I was in Goa and I was doing a session for a MNC company there, which had collected all their leaders from the globe. It was the first time that all their global leaders were congregating together, more than I think 800, 900 senior leaders. And the CEO of the company was very proud. And he told me that, all my leaders have come here from the world. First time it's happened, except some leaders who have not come from China and from Japan, because there is some virus or some such, disease that is there, but they are not able to come. But the rest of them are all here and all of that. So this was the 8th of March. And exactly 2 weeks later what happened in India. So 8th of March, a problem which was at the opposite end of the world, some virus which is over there, does not concern us in any way. In 2 weeks' time, in 10 working days, so to speak, in the business lingo, it came and hit us with such a massive upheaval that pretty much everything that we did, right down to the way we ate our food, the way we lived our lives, everything changed overnight. And for many people, actually changed much more dramatically. They didn't have food to eat, or they didn't have a place to live. So that is the rapidity with which the world situations are likely to change now. Now, I'll build that with the second word, which is uncertain. And again, the world was uncertain earlier, but let me remind you how uncertain it has become now. If I ask you today that are you free for a meeting tomorrow or day after tomorrow, or for a dinner or a lunch day after tomorrow, you might be able to give me an answer in a yes or a no. If I ask you of the same question of a date 10 days from now, I'm not very sure you'll be able to give that answer, because our horizons of certainty have now come down to 48 hours and 72 hours. Anything beyond that, you don't know what will happen. Some new lockdown will be imposed, Bombay airport will be closed, a new test will be required. There are so many uncertainties that can happen in a matter of 72 hours, that our horizon, which used to be in weeks, months, and I'm sure many of you had planned also vacations during your summer, plan to travel and go, and all of those things which were very, very reasonable to be planned 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, have gone for a complete toss, because now our horizon of certainty has reduced into hours, not even weeks. The third is that in situations like this, when there is a paradigm shift, especially in a crisis, most of the decisions that you will be asked to take will be very paradoxical, which means it will be a decision between one wrong and another wrong, or one right and another right. It will not be a black and white decision. I'll give you some examples of that as we go along. And finally, the world we are living in now is so tangled that there is no one single solution. So if you do step A, then the consequence will be step C. So each one, I'll give you a very simple example which illustrates this very powerfully. So in the beginning of this pandemic lockdown, I was part of a committee that was responsible for deciding what are essential services. So we all agree that communications are essential services. Without communication, you cannot do anything. You cannot do governance. You cannot do education. You can't do anything. So which means that the 4 lakh odd towers, which are strewn, mobile towers all over this country, they become essential services. If the towers are essential services, more than half of them are powered by diesel generators. So the diesel supply chain becomes essential services. Each tower has got radio modems and routers, which young engineers, very much like yourselves, will have to climb up and repair and fix and do all of those things. So those engineers become essential services. These engineers, most of them are bachelors, single people living in chamris and chawls and hostels. So hostels become essential services. And of course, they eat out of canteens and cafeterias and dabba services. So all of them become essential services. So you suddenly realize that in a tangled world, taking one decision has multitude of implications and consequences that you cannot forecast. There is no way you can forecast. And that is why I think the world we are living in is way, way more ruptured than the VUCA world before the pandemic. And I think this slide illustrates the power of that upheaval in one single shot, where a company whose name I'm sure most of us had not heard 1 year ago. I doubt very much that anybody had heard the name of a company called Zoom, which has now become more valuable than IBM, which is more than a 100-year-old company. And another company, which I'm sure a lot of you youngsters also would have admired as a co-working space. And after we pass out, we'll do a startup and we'll start our startup in a co-working space, blah, blah. That company, whose valuation at one point of time was the darling of the Wall Street Journal, has evaporated into thin air in a matter of 9 months. So this kind of an upheaval has certain challenges, but also some great opportunities. And I want to quote this one opportunity, which I think is a very powerful illustration of how, when you think in first principles, you can often find major opportunities where others don't see it. And this is an experiment that I'd like you to carry out right now. And this is an experiment by Professor Tina Sillig. She's written this amazing book, which I urge you all to read. It's What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20. A very powerful book. I resonate with many of the teachings in this book. And this is an experiment that she does for her students, which I would like to sort of replicate to you online right here. And even if it's for 2 minutes, just exercise your mind to do that. And I'm glad, you spoke about when it rains lemons, what are you supposed to do with those lemons? So this experiment is, she gives $5 of seed funding to her students and gives them 2 hours of time, and says that you have to think of a business plan that can generate the maximum amount of revenue in this 2 hours of time. And then you have a 3-minute slot in front of the Stanford alumni where you can present, all the Stanford students, where you can present your business plan. So I want you to take a minute or so, all of us, to try and exercise that. If you were given 2 hours and $5, or maybe 500 rupees in India, how would you generate maximum revenue with that? And of course, some of you have, almost taken up that hint, which was given earlier, that you can buy lemons and set up a lemonade stand, or you can boil eggs and sell boiled eggs, or some students even took this seed funding of $5 and bought car wash material, to wash cars, and they washed the cars, and they, in 2 hours time, they generated a certain amount of funding. A smaller group of the students who were perhaps more innovative, more creative, they realized that actually they have two resources. They have the $5 of seed funding, but they also have the 2 hours of time. And interestingly, maybe the seed funding of $5 is distracting them towards the limitations. The limitation is $5. So you think, what can I do with $5? What can I buy with $5? But with 2 hours of time, they actually came up with another idea. And their idea was that they would make reservations. They would stand in the line for restaurants which are jam-packed. And of course, this is a pre-COVID story. And they would stand in the line, and when their turn was going to come, I mean, some restaurants take almost 2 hours to find a table. They would auction their time to somebody else. They would say that, do you want to go into this dinner, and how much would you be willing to pay for that privilege of not waiting for 2? So they sold their place in the line. And interestingly, they did not even use the $5. So the $5 was not a constraint to them. They actually reframed their question to say, what would we be able to generate in terms of revenue if we had nothing, not even the $5? So they reframed that. They took away the limitation of $5. And yet, the most innovative of the team realized that it was not just the $5 or the 2 hours of time. They also had a 3-minute slot in front of the Stanford students, and they auctioned that 3-minute slot to a company which was wanting to make a pitch to the Stanford students to join them. They actually made a video about that company and played that video for 3 minutes, making the maximum amount of money out of all of these different approaches. Now, this very simple example illustrates that very often when we are presented with a crisis or a problem, we start applying our old knowledge and our old limitations to that without realizing that we can actually leverage first principles, go back to the roots, and start thinking ground up again. And these are some of the principles that I want to share with you. The first one I already spoke to you about, that old maps will never help us navigate the new world. Now, let me simplify this for you with an example of a metro map that you see in front of you. This is, of course, the London metro map, which, by the way, anecdotally is the forefather of pretty much all metro maps in the world. And the brilliance of this map by the inventor was the fact that he decided the map doesn't have to be to scale. It just has to tell people where to get on and where to get out. And obviously, the tracks don't run like these tracks are shown. They don't run in a straight line. Anybody who's traveled in any metro knows that the map of the metro and the route of the metro are two different things, because the purpose of the metro map is to help you to get in and get out and make the changes between stations. It is not to accurately map the journey. So if anybody took this metro map and came out of the metro and tried to use that to navigate, it will be a disaster. Some things may be generally right. Maybe a city or a town is on top and the general line of direction is okay. But obviously, this map, which is brilliantly accurate inside the tube, is completely useless outside the tube. Think of your learnings, think of the paradigms, think of the constructs that you have created in your head in a pre-COVID world, that I'll complete my MBA, then I'll do a couple of years of internship somewhere, and then I'll do my master, whatever your game plan, or maybe I'll do a startup and all of that. Remember, they are all old maps, and those old maps will not serve very well in the world of the future. So who says that you need to work for 2 years? Where did this 2 years come from? This 2 years came from an earlier map which said that if you work in a company, then it takes about 2 years to learn enough to be able to go and then do a master's or whatever stuff. Question all of those elements, because those elements were based on the old map and not the new map of the world that you have to navigate now. Remember also, agility and creative thinking is literally a game-changing tool. It is a game-changing tool. Now, I'm not drawing some cliched sentence that we should be agile in our thinking. That means nothing. What does it mean? You should be agile in your, suppose I told you all, you should be agile in your thinking. That's a bit like telling you, be careful when you cross the road. What are you going to do with that statement? There's very little you can do with it. But here is an example and a framework with which you can understand what agile thinking is and how it can change the world, or how it can change your game at least. This sport that you see in this slide is the high jump. And as most of you are aware, it's the first word in the Olympic logo: higher, stronger, faster. So The high jump until 1968 was performed by the athlete running towards this bar and jumping over with his foot in front. And they would put the one leg, like very much like steeplechase or hurdles, if you have seen it, or just like you would jump across a wall. If you have to jump across a small wall, you will come running and leap with both your feet and you would get to the other side. Until in the 1968 Olympics, a young civil engineering student, 21 years old, the same age as many of you, he formulated a completely new way of getting across the bar, and which was by coming and flopping with his head over first. So the head over first, body next, and legs after that was known as the Fosbury flop, which has now become the standard way of high jump. So it is true to say literally that this young 21-year-old lad changed the way the game was played thereafter. Now, there are two observations here. One, of course, was the fact that he was not an athlete. He came in completely from outside the sport. He was just a 21-year-old student. So it's not like he had decades of practice competing in Olympics. But what was more interesting was the fact, very subtle change that had gone unnoticed. What had happened was that as progression of this game happened, the earlier landing pads, which used to be just dug sand. The landing pit after you complete a jump was an area where they had dug a hole and poured sand in it. So it was a sand pit to cushion your fall. That had changed into mattresses, into foam mattresses. So the landing ground had changed, and yet the professional athletes had not leveraged the fact that the environment has changed, so you could take some bigger risks while you are landing. And Dick Fosbury was the one who spotted that and realized that because the landing surface, the environment has changed, some of the old rules can be literally reversed. Think about it. Think about it in terms of the framework that you have been trained on, educated on by your external ecosystem, by the education system. All of them, the environment has changed. And if the environment has changed, you should also look at the strategy of how you are going to leap across your obstacles. They don't have to be the same traditional way in which your predecessors did it. So many of your role models, the way they used to jump might be an inefficient way given that the environment has changed now. We must also realize that this penchant with a lot of organizations, institutions, colleges, B schools, MNCs have suddenly got of doing this online. We are now moved online. We are 100% online. Yes, it's creditable that we are holding this event online, and well, there is really no other option but to do it online. But our belief that we will take the education system, which used to do physically, and just convert it into Zoom and it will be as efficient is a complete myth. At best, this is a temporary compromise. At best, this is a compromise of taking what was arguably a not very efficient system of learning anyway. So I'll come to that story in a little while. But the fact is that many of our educational protocols basically work on a bell curve. They work on a curve that there will be toppers, the 5 to 10% toppers, and then there'll be this big middle, and then there'll be some laggards. And this is a very easy way for educational institutions to measure the performance of their students, because these are measurable things. They're very, very metric. How much you scored in a certain paper is very measurable. Real life, however, does not work that way. In real life, there is very rarely an individual whose individual contribution alone will take that person very far in life. Usually, it will have to be collaboration. And in collaborative working, the method of our principal education, primary education, is not very conducive. I'm not necessarily talking about the B school, but I'm talking pre-B school. If you look at the schooling system, it's a very cutthroat system with all parents wanting their children to be in the top 5. Now, obviously, in a class of 40, there'll be only 5 in the top 5, and the remaining 35 will not be in the top 5. This belief that, in good old days, I don't know if it still happens, but good old days, students were taught to write like this, that you first cover your answer sheet and then write the answer so that nobody else can see and copy, because if they saw what you did, they will be able to replicate it, and therefore you will lose your advantage. So you can't train a child for 10 to 12 years of their education to work like this and then one day say collaborate. It doesn't work like that. Now, what has happened is that even that little collaboration that used to happen in colleges, because you do projects together, you will meet other friends, you will work on it together, you will go through travel, bonding, corridor, canteen, cafeteria, bunking the college, watching movies. These were all elements in which collaboration was being built. It was being fostered. Those elements are also not available. So when we design education now, it cannot just be, and by the way, this is not something that I'm talking to the faculty, I'm talking to everybody, I'm talking to the students, because at the end of the day, I think in a B school, any good B school, which I'm sure will be the same pattern in your school, the faculty are supposed to be people providing direction and guidance. It's the students who have to take ownership of their learning. So to that extent, I think the students will have to rethink. Remember one thing, that it's very sexy and seductive to think that if you are able to use Facebook and make a website and have a blog and set up a Instagram account, you're tech savvy. That is complete hogwash. What you are using are the consumer facing tools which have been designed for ease. Even complete uneducated people, illiterate people, old people who have never handled technology can figure out a way to make a Facebook page or an Instagram page or a blog. The real learning is, the real education is how to make the infrastructure which makes Facebook run, how to make the infrastructure which makes Instagram run. That is an extremely complicated framework. So just because you are tech savvy by setting up a Zoom account and thinking now I have become tech savvy, you have become savvy in using what is a very easy to use product which is designed for use by a novice. Mastering that is extremely superficial in terms of knowledge. So please redesign the way you look at acquiring knowledge, which brings me to the next point, is to realize the importance of deep work. I don't have the time to deal with this topic right now, but I will be doing a session today evening. Those of you who are interested, I'll have the link sent across where I'll talk about this topic in detail. But very briefly, over the last 10 to 15 years, our ability to do deep, meaningful work has reduced dramatically. I'll give you a couple of examples. Those of you who want to play along can do it. Why don't you recite 5 phone numbers other than your own? And you'll suddenly get stymied. Maybe you remember 1, maybe you remember 2 numbers. Good old days, when we had the dialing phone, it was very normal for people to remember up to 10 to 15 different numbers. Why don't you try and multiply 16 into 7? And now suddenly you will be stymied, because in good old days, multiplication tables of up to 16 were normal. People used to just recite these tables. Increasingly, technology that has come into our lives is moving us away from the ability to concentrate and to do deep work. We are very good at doing shallow work. What is shallow work? So I've got a screen open in front of me. I'm writing my paper that I have to submit tomorrow. My Facebook chat is on. I'm looking at Instagram. In between, I'm also checking my Twitter feed. I'm directing my attention into many, many small different parcels of time to pay attention for a very brief period. That can never result in deep work. It can never result. So I want you to draw an analogy. You're all in the knowledge working space. I want you to draw an analogy that if you were to watch a painter at work or a sculptor at work, that people who are making jewelry with that, they are cutting the jewelry can you visualize that person who's making a very fine piece of art being constantly disturbed by somebody? Hey, check your mail, hey, check your WhatsApp message, hey, check this, check. Do you think that person will be able to pay the attention of craftsmanship which is required to produce a work of art if that person was constantly being diverted and brain attention was being taken away? There's a concept called attention residue. All of that was happening. Do you think that person would be able to create that piece of art? If not, what makes you think that when you do what is supposed to be deep work, you can create anything which is even comparable to a piece of art or something that is really high quality if you're constantly working in a shallow mode, if you're constantly being distracted? It's a topic that you really, really need to focus on, because interestingly, in the world of the future, one of the key skills, the killer skill, will be the ability of an individual to learn something very rapidly. And by learning something, I'm not saying how to make a Facebook page or how to use Excel. It is how to build Excel. It is how to build a Microsoft Office. That is a deep skill. Anybody who has the ability to master that skill will be worth their weight in gold. By the way, COVID is not doing anything which was not due to happen in any case in 5 to 10 years time. If you thought that automated work, automatable jobs were not going away, or robotics was not coming in, or artificial intelligence was not going to make this was all going to happen anyway. What COVID has done is just ripped off the band-aid in one instant and made a change that would have otherwise taken a long period of time and compressed it into maybe 10 months. So anything that I'm talking to you right now is basically what was going to happen anyway. Now, in a world where mediocrity reigns, remember one thing: what the post-COVID world will do is a new phenomenon. That phenomenon is that if there is somebody who is even slightly more talented than you, slightly more productive than you, then that person can be accessed by the employer from anywhere in the world. It makes more sense for an employer to pay a top dollar to the world's best programmer for 6 hours of time than to employ a mediocre performer at a lower cost, but employ with the capex and office space and electricity bill and this and that. It is increasingly going to become a world of staff on demand, talent on demand. Staff on demand will therefore rule the fact that anybody who is more talented than you will actually be in higher demand. The only way to develop more talent is actually grown, by the way. It is not something that you're born with. Yes, you may have a flair for it, but to become extremely talented, you have to do deep work. And that is why I urge all students today who actually take pride in the fact that I have 7 screens open in front of me when I'm working, while also listening to music. I would urge you to study real scientific journals and books on it. There is a book titled Deep Work, by the way, which is written by Cal Newport. I would urge you to read that and realize that in the world of the future, if you don't develop the ability to concentrate and focus for long periods of time, which is an essentiality to produce deep work, you will be handicapped and you will end up as a fairly mediocre person. So pay attention to this aspect, and hopefully, and try and attend the session today evening where I talk about this in a little more detail. This is a very interesting experiment that I would urge you to do if you have not already done it. I'm pretty sure that many of you might be familiar with it. It's called the Marshmallow Tower experiment. Now, I'll describe this to you. Those of you who have not ever done it in your life or heard about it, I would urge you to go to YouTube and check it out. It's really funny. And I'm making this point. I speak about this in many of my sessions, but in this particular session, there is a very important point I want to make about this Marshmallow Tower experiment. For those of you who don't know it, it's a very simple experiment. A group of 8 to 10 people are given some 20 sticks, small slender sticks like jhadu gatilli or spaghetti or whatever, and they're given a piece of thermocol or marshmallow, which is where the name comes, and they have to, and some duct tape, regular tape, and they have to build the highest tower possible. Now, interestingly, this experiment has been done with various different demographies. It's been done with CEOs, with management trainees, with doctors, with surgeons, with lawyers, with aircraft manufacturers, every demography they have been done. The ones who perform the worst are management trainees. And I'll tell you the reason why. Ones who perform the best, any guesses? Interestingly, it is the kindergarten kids. The kindergarten kids actually perform the best. And the interesting reason why organizational dynamics behavior specialists talk about it is the fact that most management trainees have been inducted into a mindset of frugality. They are taught that there is a zero-sum game, which means if you win, someone has to lose. So in your group, if you have to stand out as the person, the Keen Kumar who gets stuff done, or the Keen Kumari, then somebody else has to be put down. And there is that, because it's a very linear system of scoring in most of our education system and our environment, and even in our corporates when we join, it's a very linear system of scoring. So if you've got 10 people in your team, you are told that only 2 can be given an A, 6 to 7 have to be given a B, and 1 or 2 have to be given a C. So a bell curve is enforced on you, which basically makes it a dog-eat-dog environment. It makes it an environment where for you to get that seat, someone else has to lose it. But real life, again, is not like that. In real life, very rarely will individual performers go very high in life. You will at a point in time, and pretty soon, actually, if you want to do a startup or you want to do something which involves a team, anything meaningful involves a team, you will realize that your ability to work as a team member, or the ability to get people who are much more competent than you, much more capable than you, to work with you as a team, depends on this skill, which is collaboration. It is not cutthroatism, but collaboration, which is the need of the world outside. And so to that extent, I would urge you to start practicing collaboration at the earliest possible. Now, how can you practice collaboration? I think there are many, many ways to do it. One of the easiest ways to do it is, if you're a good student in some subject, then make it an onus that you're going to take some other student who's bad in that subject, and together you will crack that. You will realize that you're pulling somebody else who's weaker than you in that area will actually strengthen you much more and teach you a lot more leadership skills. Remember one thing, that each person who's in this webinar, as a student at least, is an extraordinarily lucky student, because I know your university, and I know the people who reach your university. They are the cream of the cream. And you are associated with a tier 1 faculty. You are given a tier 1 education, and you are used to working with your friends and your colleagues and your students, co-students, who are all as equally brilliant and smart as you are. But again, that is not real life. In real life, when you will go into your respective jobs and commands, maybe you will get 4 or 5 people who will work with you. Those 4 or 5 people may come from very, very differently privileged backgrounds. They may not be as quick on the uptake as you are. They may not understand the Angrezi you do. They may not understand the concepts of Michael Porter and Philip Kotler and all of that. How will you lead them if you don't have the ability to collaborate and to pull weaker people to your sort of length, to bring them up to you? And that's the skill that you learn by assisting a student who is weaker than you. So you'll have to find methods to train on the muscles which you'll be required to use in the corporate. In the corporate, I doubt very much that people are looking for what we call I specialists. I specialists, I did this, I did this, I did this, I was the topper. Nobody wants that. Because I specialists might be very good individual contributors. They might be very good as salespeople. They might be very good as a chartered accountant, as an individual. But the moment they have to create a team, they will have to have the skill of collaboration. And that, to my mind, in the world of the future, is going to be a much more in demand skill, because the skills and competencies required in the world to solve complex problems will not exist in one individual. They will have to be brought to the table by a group of individuals, and only a group of individuals who can work and collaborate together can actually divert their energy towards the end product and not towards ego hassles with one another. One of the reasons why management trainees do the worst, it's documented, by the way, you can check it, in the Marshmallow Tower, is each one is trying to show that my idea is the best, or they are all looking at the evaluator and trying to show that, look at me, I'm the one who is giving the most positive idea. Very few people are focusing on the tower. Whereas in kindergarten, kids don't really care about the annual report. They don't care whether they'll pass out in the first grade, whether they'll be picked up in the day 1 placement. They don't care about that. They care about the mission. And that is why they are able to collaborate far better and create a much more superior product. Remember that. I want to talk about this issue because it is an issue that is being even now socially not discussed in as much of discussion as it should. So, by the way, forget about mental health, forget about depression, stress, and I have heard this anecdotal data, and I'm pretty sure in your college you would have counseling facilities and all of that, and with 1 degree of separation, maybe not even with 1 degree, 0 degree of separation, all of you might know somebody who is going through a mental health challenge. Before we discuss all of that, well before COVID, already it has been proven statistically that the Gallup surveys have carried out, innumerable surveys have been carried out over 140 different countries, thousands of workplaces. It's been discovered that less than 20% of the workforce is fully engaged in their jobs. About 60% is going through the motions on a daily basis. They come to office, they do the regular stuff that they have to do, they answer emails, they take phone calls, they keep looking at the clock to make sure that it's 5 o'clock or whatever, and then they go. So they are non-committal, they are fence sitters. And 20% actually sabotage the organization. They are consciously working because they're bitter, they're unhappy in the situation, they are constantly, these are the people who are those negative-minded people you will meet who will give you a 40-slide PowerPoint presentation on why it cannot be done. It can't be done. Now, the point is that if you have a workforce in which only about 20% people are fully engaged, then instead of focusing on the latest management fad, latest tool, another new tool called Basecamp or Slack, I think it might be much more beneficial for the organization and for the individuals to say, how do we get the remaining 80% who are disengaged and get them more engaged? How do we get them more ownership? Now, one of the elements of ownership is found that you need to be in contact to be owning something. You have to feel that you have a sense of ownership over it. That is why the dog which is outside your door, the stray dog outside your door, you have some sense of affinity to it because you have a sense of ownership over it. You don't care about a stray dog which gets run over by a car. Maybe you do because it's an animal, but not as much as you care about this. These elements of caring, these elements of showing that we care for each other, of giving each other feedback, physical feedback, body language feedback, all of that will get taken away by the pandemic. Now, in a world which was already disengaged, you now have a challenge of mental health because there is no way. Let me explain this to you, and this you can validate this with mental health professionals, and they will tell you the same thing. Firstly, mental health is something that affects everybody. It's like viral fever. All of us will get it 3, 4, 5, 6 times in our lives, maybe even more. It's like fever. You will get it. You'll go through it for a few weeks, and after that you will be okay. So it's not that, oh, this person has got some stress or mental health issues and therefore. Secondly, it is a completely normal situation because the signs of mental health and the signs of sadness are exactly the same. They're the same. You don't feel like getting up. You don't feel like eating. You don't feel like you feel depressed. You feel sad all the time. This is exactly the state of mind when a person is sad, which is the same state of mind which is diagnosed in many cases as mental health. I would urge you as a community of students to realize that you are possibly going through the biggest stress than any other community right now. You were on the cusp of making your career. In many cases, maybe even financial plans were linked with it. Financial plans of the household was linked with the fact that you will start working in 2022, 23, and then you'll pay off a loan or whatever. That world has become topsy-turvy. I don't have the answers to how you will solve your problem, but I can tell you that a depressed state of mind, you will never come out with good answers. You will never ever get good answers. If you want to find how to navigate through this mess, then the first thing you've got to do is to bring yourself in a good state of mind, which ironically is very easy to do when you're helping someone else. If you are helping somebody else go through their battles and their stresses, this is brain chemistry. I can take another 3-hour session to explain how and why, but there are release of chemicals like serotonin and oxytocin, which surge into your brain when you assist somebody, when you help someone. And I think if we as a group realize that mental health is a big challenge, we are all afflicted by it by some degree or the other, and there is no point in denying it. Unfortunately, COVID has given us a silver lining where we can talk about, not superficially, not to say, oh, we have started a meditation class or do yoga 3 times in a week and it'll become okay, but actually to go deeper into the issue, to talk to friends, to talk to counselors, to talk to individuals who will help us navigate through or even help people who we can very clearly see are suffering from this challenge. Many years ago, I read a book called Illusions. I would urge those of you like reading to read that book. It's written by an author called Richard Bach. And he had a very powerful statement in that line. Very, very powerful statement in that book. He says, what the caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls the butterfly. Now, it's a very profound statement, but I think it's very important for us to understand this. If you were thinking of yourself as a caterpillar, and you said that I am inside this shell and I basically crawl and do this and I eat leaves and all of that, and one day my shell is going to break off and I'm going to, this body of mine is going to change. I'm no longer going to eat leaf. Instead, I'll be given something called nectar, and I'll no longer be able to go through these comfortable branches. Instead, I'll have to learn a new skill called flying, and I'll have to travel great distances to find my food. You will think that it is the end of the world, because you are ceasing to exist as a caterpillar, which is true. But if you consider that to be a transformation to a butterfly, then of course there is no end to the possibilities. You are exponentially going to increase in your range, in your remit, in the areas that you will go through, in the heights that you will attain, literally, because you are flying instead of being tied down to a branch. The way to change that attitude of looking at the world as if it is ending for a caterpillar or beginning of a transformation for a butterfly is your horizon. If you shift your horizon not to the next exam that you have to pass or the first job that you have to find or something like that, but a horizon to how may I leverage this crisis that has come? How may I take this $5 and the 2 hours and go back to first principles thinking and figure out what I can create? How may I form a group of maybe 5 or 6 students right now while we are in college, so that when we do a company, we start a company, we can go to an MNC and tell the MNC, your entire website designing and this and that and social management, social media management, we 5 will do for you at half the cost that you're paying to a number one agency, because we have within us a writer, sort of graphic specialist, whatever. These kind of thinking must begin now. You must think much more entrepreneurially now, because there aren't that many jobs out there. You're all aware, I'm sure you all have friends, colleagues, elder brothers, parents in MNCs, corporates, and you're all aware that corporates are actually cutting headcount. They're not increasing it. So if you think you will be able to fight for that 5 seats for which 5,000 other people are fighting, to my mind, it is a silly decision to take. Instead, if you realize that there is going to be immense opportunity in entrepreneurship, immense opportunities to create solutions, which, by the way, even the giants of technology field could not envisage. So nobody needs to tell Cisco what video conferencing is. They had a video conferencing solution 20 years ago. Nobody needs to tell FaceTime or WhatsApp or the inventors of Skype. But why is it that a company called Zoom made that race and these big companies could not do it? It is because the smaller company has one Brahmastra, one strategic weapon, which the larger companies don't have. They have agility, the ability to break themselves, transform them. They have the ability to change from caterpillar to butterfly again and again and again. Never lose the sight of that advantage. The world has indeed changed. There is no doubt about it. But that change also has spawned hundreds and thousands of opportunities. You can see this was an article that appeared in June, which was the peak of the pandemic lockdown. And in this article, more than 100 companies were shown as game-changing advantages and game-changing opportunities which happened. So remember, you will see what you are looking for. If in this crisis you are going to see despondency, you're going to, oh shit, all my plans, I had planned to do this for 2 years and then find a job. Now that's not happening. This is not happening. You're navigating by the old map. And very clearly, if you're navigating with the old map, the new landmarks will look strange. You will curse the map. You will curse your bad luck. And you'll say, but if you look at it in terms of an opportunity, if you look at how many things are changing and how many opportunities are there, then you will realize that probably you are entering corporates at the cusp of the best advantage you have. You will be a young, agile thinker who can reinvent themselves again and again. And that is a skill that corporates will be seeking, that the entrepreneurship market is seeking, that problems are seeking for inventors of solution, inventors very much like you. So thanks a ton for this opportunity to speak with you, and I wish you all the very best for this 2-day event, and of course for the rest of your career and your life. And if there are any questions, I'll try to answer them. If you don't have the time, that's my Twitter handle. Feel free to pose your questions on Twitter. If you believe that the question will benefit other people also, make it an open question. If you think it's personal, then you can send me a direct message. Some of the books that I mentioned and I referred, I have articles based on them on my website. You can check them out as well. And I'm now open to questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you for your words of inspiration, sir. Would I be at fault if I use the words of the father of the nation to describe you to the audience? Ladies and gentlemen, the captain's life is his message. So learn from his words. But more than that, learn from his life. Thank you, sir, for your presence.
Thank you very much. You have a nice day.
How do I introduce the cornerstone of GLS? Sir, you'll have to stop the presentation sharing. So that. Thank you, sir. How do I introduce the cornerstone of GLS? Sri Sudhir Nanavati, sir. His name itself is enough. Not only because he's so well known all over India as the face of Gujarat Law Society, but most of all in the context of the theme of image. His name is who he is. So, what more do you need in a pandemic, in a global calamity, in a struggling economy, in a personal crisis? You need Sudhir, Tari Dheeraj, great patience. It is an honor and privilege to call upon the President of GLS University and Executive Vice President of Gujarat Law Society to give his presidential address.
Thank you. Thank you. And for a nice word about describing about my name, Sudhir. I think my wife has still not understood that meaning. And when she will understand, I will be more. Falidani, Director, GLS BBA College, members of the faculties, my colleagues at the Center Administration, and participants from across the globe. Good afternoon, one and all. As a president of GLS University, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all at the inaugural function of the annual management phased image with the theme of harnessing disruption, organized by Faculty of Business Administration. This event is different from the way in which it is organized till the last year on two counts. One, the event has gone online, and consequently, it has also gone international. At the beginning of the academic year, when majority of the institutes struggle managing the continuation of teaching learning process online, we at GLS University carried out all interactual activities like various competitions, workshops, seminars, etc. online. We were able to accept the challenges posed by COVID-19 pandemic in our university because we are a part of legacy which has been handed down to us by founding fathers like Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Ganesh Mavlankar, Kasturbai Lalbhai, Sri I.M. Nanavati, who has established Gujarat Law Society Trust in 1927. Following the philosophy of progress being rooted in disruption and change, GLS Trust established a private university with the same name in 2015 to cater to the changing academic needs of the society, which underwent sea change due to rapid industrialization, globalization, and digitalization. As an academic establishment, we have not only encountered disruption headlong, but we have always succeeded in harnessing the disruptions in a way which has shaped and branded our identity. At the same time, we at GLS strive to create a strong lineup of responsible citizens by mentoring our students through activities that widen their critical thinking, deepen their insight, and enhance their exposure to the external world. It is a matter of pride and privilege for us to have with us Captain Raghuraman, whose philosophy is that things are not as bad as they seem at first, to inaugurate this 2 days long management fest. I am sure your words of wisdom and experience will transmit to participants to die-hard spirit to handle change coolly and calmly. Thank you for with us online, but I would invite you to visit our university whenever you happen to be in Ahmedabad and whenever the situation of present pandemic permits to do so. On a positive note, I am happy to share with you that disruption caused by the pandemic has expanded the outreach of this fest. Participation has been overwhelming this year with students from more than 90 institutes across the globe who are competing to demonstrate their managerial insights. I have been told that students from countries like Russia, Nepal, and Australia, as well as students of reputed institutes like IIM, IITs, A-grade universities are participating in this event. I am sure that participation in this management fest will help you explore new possibilities in your lives as well as career. Before I end my speech, let me tell you that today what we have heard, the chief guest of this morning and his ideas, this would have become possible because of the online. Otherwise, sitting at various corners of the globe and getting the benefit of such type of the dignitaries to listen, why at least I will advise all the students participating today that do not miss any of the workshop or the any type of the evening, the speech which is going to be delivered by the chief guest as well as the other guests, because such type of benefit has come in this pandemic situation, which is no doubt unfortunate situation, but has given the fortunate circumstances that without leaving your house or without leaving the institute, you can listen and you can get such type of information, knowledge, and the real practical experience of chief guests like today. I extend my best wishes to the participants while congratulating GLS BBA team for organizing the fest with an international outreach. Thank you very much and have a good day. Have a nice time.
Thank you, sir. Every special moment ends, and this occasion is no exception. On behalf of GLS Faculty of Business Administration, GLS BBA, I extend deep gratitude to our chief guest, Captain Raghuraman sir, Sri Sudhir Nanavati sir, Director Dr. Shefali Dani, and all the other dignitaries who spared time from the busy schedule to grace the occasion. Events like this cannot happen overnight. So, as the wheel of image starts rolling, I want to acknowledge the weeks and months of planning, effort, and rigor that went into it. All the faculty who have been fortunate to be backed by a team of very dedicated and motivated students and an amazing management have been the building bricks on which Image stands. I would like to thank every person who has contributed to make this event successful. One last word to all the participants. Remember that more than winning or losing, it is the spirit of participation and sportsmanship that will give you the experience we have intended to give you. May this competition bring out the best in you and spur you on to greater achievements in life. All the best. It has been an honor to be here before you. This is Vinita Anand.